Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. The first story is called Always Register. I'm a science graduate student. At my workplace we keep registry logs for everything. It states when we use X or Y thing, the state it was in, and when we finished using it. This is required by law to be kept up to date on consecutive entries. If someone wrote down that they finished using it at 9 AM, the next entry can say that they started at 8:59 AM, because someone else was using it at the time. Anyways, part of my experiments requires me to come on weekends to a specific area where you need both a keycard and an actual key to enter. Of course, it has its own registry. But because the logs are kept at the reception and that part is locked on weekends, we do not fill out the log on weekends or times when the receptionist hasn't arrived or has already left. No biggie, we just leave the key in a hidden but accessible to anyone that needs it place. A few weeks ago, when I arrived, I was immediately called to the reception. She asked why I was not on the log and if I had used the key. When I tried to explain that there was no way for me to fill out the log because they keep it locked, I was met with a "just go ahead and fill it out, it's not a big deal. And make sure you always register your entry times on the log." So I wrote the log entry with the date of the Saturday and my times. After the ones that had used the key that day, meaning that they were now out of order. When they realized the mistake, they tried to pin it on me, but I shrugged and told them it was not my mistake. They had to cancel the whole log page, print a new one and manually write all of the entries, around 30, so that mine was in order. They never said anything about the entry logs over weekends anymore. The next story is called Destroying the Lawn. I lived next door to a couple of high-functioning alcoholics living in a pretty big villa. Their screaming matches at night were legendary. This is relevant because it says something about their communication skills and scream first, think later attitudes. They hired a contractor to expand their concrete balcony. 2 concrete columns were already constructed when they were putting in the beam. During or shortly after the pouring of the beam, the lady of the house wakes up, hungover. At some point, she realizes that there are 2 jack posts that are holding up the beam while it's drying. Those were some heavy footers that were on the grass lawn. So the yelling starts. How dare they destroy her grass like that? Get those jack posts out of there immediately. A discussion ensues and the contractor makes her sign something before removing the jack posts and the footings. The beam did not collapse, but it is clearly V-shaped now. The third story is called The Little Man. I'm not a car guy. I have never been a car guy and never will be a car guy. My car, to me, is something to get from point A to point B, nothing more. I drive a small Kia. At this moment, I'm not in my hometown. I'm actually at Niagara Falls, Ontario, and it was mid-afternoon, so I was getting hungry. I decided to take a drive around to find something to eat. Out of nowhere, this large truck cuts right in front of me without signaling. It scared the heck out of me, so I honked. I guess it set the guy off, because he took off and slammed on his brakes right where the 2 lanes merged into one. This was road rage at its finest. The driver actually got out of his truck, walked to the back of it and just started screaming at me, saying get out of the car, just flipping out. He was a little guy. It's always the short guys. Now I get it, he figured he was going to win. I look like a little guy when I'm in my car. It's a small car. But this guy is blocking the road, just swearing and yelling at me to get out of the car, generally trying to antagonize me. So I said, screw it, give the jerk what he wants. Now let's just say I'm not a little guy. The second my size 13 shoes hit the asphalt, you could see in his face that he had made a mistake. Once I stood, his face went white. And all I did was look at him and say, "Yes, can I help you?" I have never ever seen a man nope out of a situation faster than that. Without saying another word, he sprinted to the front of his car, got in without saying a single word, and left. And all I did was give him what he wanted. I got out of my car. The last story is called Do What You Gotta Do. This story takes place in Australia back in 2011. I'm American, but I was in Australia at the time on a working holiday visa. Considered a backpacker, the idea was I would work to supplement my travel expenses. Prior to this, I spent several months working as a server at a restaurant in Sydney. After saving some money, I was able to travel the country for a couple of months before eventually ending up in Cairns, where I planned to replenish my funds. I found the hospitality industry the easiest to work in, because I had serving experience and it paid well. You don't get many tips in Australia, but the hourly wage was around $18 per hour at the time, depending on which state you were in. In Australia, it's not uncommon for a restaurant to have you come in for a trial before they hire you. It is usually just a couple of hours to see if you can handle waiting tables or that you didn't lie about prior experience. Technically, you are supposed to be paid during a trial, but that doesn't always happen. The first trial I did in Sydney was only 1.5 hours and they provided the work attire. I didn't get paid, but felt for such a short period of time it was no skin off my back. I did another trial in Sydney at a different restaurant and ended up getting paid for it on my first paycheck after they hired me. When I arrived in Cairns, I was down to my last $200. I needed to find a job immediately. I rocked around with copies of my resume, dropping them off at different restaurants. There was a nice little restaurant on the water where I spoke to the owner. We'll call her Susan. I made it explicitly clear that I was only looking for a serving job. Susan and I agreed that I would come in the following day at 6 p.m. for a trial. I needed to wear a solid white button-down shirt and black pants. Having lived out of backpack for the past couple of months, I didn't have these, so I spent $60 on the required clothing just to attend the trial. Now, the restaurant was pretty small, maybe 12 tables total. When I arrived, it was just Susan and 2 female servers. She immediately tells me to grab an apron and man the bar. I told her that I thought this was a trial for a server position and that I had zero bartending experience. I couldn't even make a simple cocktail, let alone man the bar by myself. She was having none of it. Reluctantly, I agreed to try, in hopes that after seeing how bad I was, she would give me some tables. Needless to say, it was a disaster. Other than pouring beer and wine, I was useless. One of the female servers kept having to take time away from her tables to make the drinks. It turns out that the server that was helping me had several years of bartending experience, but Susan wouldn't let her bartend because it looks better to have a man behind the bar. Meanwhile, Susan herself never lifted a finger. She spent the whole night at one of the tables drinking wine with 2 of her friends. Around 9 p.m, Susan announces she is leaving. I asked her if that concludes the trial. She told me no, that I should stick around until close and we'd talk tomorrow. At this point, I knew the whole trial was BS. Her normal bartender had the night off and she just needed someone to fill in for the night. Even so, I ended up staying until 11 p.m, helping the 2 servers with the closing duties. I felt bad leaving them short-handed, it wasn't their fault after all. During that time, I learned what type of person Susan was. One of the servers told me Susan once took money out of the tip jar to pay a check that a table had skipped out on. I decided then that Susan wasn't getting any free labor out of me. I wasn't going to spend 5 hours of my time and $60 out of pocket on clothing to help her. The next day, Susan called, and surprise, I didn't get the job. I told her that's fine, just let me know how I go about getting paid for the trial. She says, "Oh, we don't pay for trials." I nicely told her that she was legally obligated to pay me for my time, and if she didn't, I would be forced to file a claim with the Fair Work Ombudsman. Her response was, "Do what you gotta do." So I did. I called the Fair Work Ombudsman, who confirmed that yes, I was entitled to 5 hours of compensation at the minimum wage of $18 per hour. I first had to write a letter to Susan asking for the money. If she still didn't comply after 30 days, I could file a claim. I wrote a very courteous letter requesting $90 and sent it to Susan via certified mail. Of course, I never heard back. So after 30 days, I filed the claim. I ended up finding a great serving job at a hotel restaurant and soon forgot about the whole ordeal. Fast forward 6 months and I'm back in the US. I randomly get a call from an Australian number who happens to be the accountant for Susan's restaurant. She asked me for some information in order to get me set up in their system as an employee so I can get paid. Within a couple of days, I had $134 transferred to my bank account. Not only did I get the $90, but I was paid some back-end things and paid leave accrual. I don't know exactly what happened on her end with the Fair Work Ombudsman, but I imagine Susan was facing some hefty fines if she didn't pay me. In the end, it wasn't a lot of money, but rather the principle of the matter. I wasn't going to let Susan get away with free labor in my case, as I'm sure she did with other trials. Hopefully she thought twice the next time her bartender took a night off. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and would like to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.